So now we open the session for everybody to ask any question to Tara Di. We have received your books, but still it is always the personal touch which inspires, and we want to take this opportunity to know from you the essence of how she molded you into being a leader, the power in organization. Yeah, so we opened, Taradi said that she cannot give talks, so if people wish to ask her questions, they are most welcome.
No philosophical questions, please. I won't be able to answer them.
I will bring the mic.
Having read the book, it gives an idea how intimate and how close the work was. But could you tell us some practical example about how she was training you with those things, some incidents? I'm thinking about the organizational capacity.
About?
Organizational work.
Organizational capacity work.
As I mentioned in the book, she was... As I mentioned in the book that she gave work. I mean, it is not 1 week or so, it is a period of 30 years. So naturally, little thing here, little thing there. And whenever you did something good, she patted you on the back, and whenever you had not done something well, she told you how to do it, how it should have been done. So it's very difficult to put it in a nutshell, something which has been just like schooling. You can't put your whole schooling into a nutshell, what you learned when you were small, what you learned when you were big. She was there to guide us all. And in the early years when there were less children, then she gave individual attention to every child. And we got a little more attention because we were in the boarding. Ours was the first boarding that started. And that was on 15th January 1945. So when the boarding started, we were the only children. On the whole, there were probably not more than 60, 70 children in the school. But we were the only children who didn't have our parents there. So we were special. For everything she would remember us special. When she got something special to eat, it would come to the boarding. When there was anything special function, she would call the boarding children first. Because the others had their mothers to give them, shower their love and pay attention to them. For us it was, mother was always taking special care that way. And as children, nobody likes any food. Everywhere it is the same. So we never liked the dining hall food, and it was really very difficult to eat the dining hall food. So her kitchen was, mother had her own kitchen where 2 ladies used to cook for her. They were asked to make twice a week special things for us, which used to come. They used to first go to mother. Mother would taste it and then send it to us. So it used to come as prasad. Similarly, once a week we used to get prasad from Shri Aurobindo. That means Shri Aurobindo used to eat, and there was always some extra plate from which he would touch or take a little, and it used to come as prasad to our boarding, and we all used to get a little bit of Shri Aurobindo's prasad. I have no experiences with Shri Aurobindo except the darshans that we went to. Oh, I should catch it down. Okay. We used to go for every darshan 4 times a year, and I came with my father and my brothers and sisters on the 1st of August 1944. So from that time all the 4 darshans until November 1950 I've had. So I was 8 years old when Sri Aurobindo passed away. I was 14. So we've had all the darshans, and then 2 years, 1949 and 50, we marched in our new sports uniform in front of Sri Aurobindo also. So those 2 years we had 2 extra darshans. That's my connection with Sri Aurobindo. But I know Mother herself told me that she used to keep. They never talked during darshan, but they had some sign language by which Mother used to bring to him, to Sri Aurobindo, all the problems, all the good things of the work she was doing. And when she had to point out somebody, then she used to have some sign by which Sri Aurobindo would know that this is a person. So I know that Mother had pointed me out to Sri Aurobindo. She told me that herself. So that I know that Sri Aurobindo has looked at me as Tara, not as just as another child in the queue. That's the only connection with Sri Aurobindo. We had no other connection. That reminds me that we used to go, 6 girls in my book, you must have seen, 6 of us used to go together, and we used to stand in the, wait on the stairs. From the meditation hall, that staircase goes up, and you turn right into the darshan room. But there is a door on the left which is called the couloir. Couloir is just a small space where Mother used to stand and give darshan. When there were many darshans, there was 4 o'clock darshan, there was 6 o'clock darshan, there was balcony darshan, then there was there's a terrace darshan, then at another time there were the Ashramites darshan, which meant that those who were department in charge, they used to go with their notebooks and all to get signatures and all that sort of thing. Then there used to be one darshan when she came back from the playground at night, and then there was one last darshan at 10 in the night. So there were many darshans. So me and my friends, we used to go at during school recess. During the school recess, we used to go, and we used to sit inside the couloir. From the steps, you enter that door, and we used to sit there. And on the right-hand side was the door leading to Sri Aurobindo's rooms. You remember Sri Aurobindo's room? Then there is a long passage, and then is the darshan room. So this door opened to the long passage, and we could hear Sri Aurobindo's voice, because Nirodha would be reading Savitri, and Sri Aurobindo would stop him, correct him, and then they would talk a little, and then again the correction would start. So we could hear his voice, and we were not allowed to enter there. So not even put your feet inside. So we remained here, and every day we used to think, how can we see Sri Aurobindo? How can we manage to see Sri Aurobindo? So what we started doing, my feet are in the couloir, and then we would lie down, because then there was another door, and then we would lie down inside. Now I have not gone in, my feet are outside, I have not gone inside, and we would try to see Sri Aurobindo, never managed.
Could you describe Sri Aurobindo's voice?
I have heard, yes, because of that.
How was his voice? Can you
He had a
describe?
very soft voice and absolute English pronunciation.
You took many photos of Mother. What was Mother's, I don't know, reason or motivation for giving you that opportunity?
If you could raise your hand, we will ensure that the microphone reaches you, and then you can articulate your question. That way we will be capturing it too.
You had taken many photos of the Mother. I was wondering about Mother's attitude, her motivations or reasons for allowing you that wonderful opportunity to take so many photos, and what her reaction was to looking at those photos.
from 1920, from 1920 to 1950, photography was not allowed in the ashram. But when mother came back for the second time, before that there were no cameras, so there were no photographs. You had to go to the studios in town where Sri Aurobindo has been a few times, and some photographs of Sri Aurobindo in the early years are all in the studios in Pondicherry. Nobody had a camera to take his pictures. But I think it must have been 1947-48 when Chiman Bhai was the first photographer. He came from South Africa and he had learnt photography, and he came with a camera and he was taking pictures in the ashram. And then seeing him, 2-3 other people bought cameras. So there were some cameras in 1950. But it was not allowed. Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's pictures we were not allowed to take. In 1932, there are a few pictures of the mother taken by some Puraniji's guest from the terrace above when mother was going out. Every first of the mother used, on the first of the month, on Prosperity Day, after Prosperity was distributed, mother used to go down, sit in her car and go for a long drive. She loved fast, long driving. And Pavitrada used to drive, and Pranabda used to sit inside also, and she used to go on long drives. So at that time when she was coming out to the car, there are a few pictures which were taken in a box camera. And then when mother found out that he had taken pictures, the box camera and the photographs were confiscated. But then in 1950, the famous photographer Cartier-Bresson came to Pondicherry. When he came, mother gave him permission to take Sri Aurobindo's pictures. So in 1950, those are the only pictures we have. She gave him permission, and the ashram photographers, those 2-3 people who were there, they were absolutely so angry with mother that we live here and we are not allowed, and this man comes from outside and he is allowed to take pictures. Anyway, there were conditions with him, and one of the conditions was that he will not print these pictures anywhere outside without permission. He was a German, he came from Germany. And he took rows and rows of pictures of the ashram, of mother, of Sri Aurobindo, all that. And then he went back and he printed in a magazine the pictures with an article on nuns in shorts. And then mother asked him to give all the negatives. And in those days you could buy a film, 35mm film for 2 rupees, but which means today 200 rupees. But he sold those films to the mother at 20,000 rupees, and we were all so angry because he took so much money. But then that is the only thing we have of Sri Aurobindo now.
Darade, I would like to add a little bit here. Henry Cartier-Bresson has started a very famous organization, Magnum Agency. And this is the news in photography world that he used that money to start that organization which mother has given me. This is acclaimed international agency across the world.
Achha.
The question still was, how did you come into photography with mother?
Yeah. So, how did I come into photography with mother? So I was working in the physical education department, and Pranab, you know Pranabda, commonly known as Dada, he got interested in photography. Mother gave him a box camera. And with that he started. Then when mother saw that he was interested, she got him a good camera. And that box camera came to me. And I started taking pictures with that box camera. But that is still with me, I still have it. And then then when mother stopped coming down, that is in 1958, all the ashram photographers, even visitors, were permitted to take pictures on the terrace darshan. The balcony darshan stopped because mother stopped coming down. And on her second floor terrace, they had made a balcony-like place on the terrace from where she used to give darshan on the road in front of the dispensary. So that was, we used to call it the terrace darshan to differentiate it from the balcony darshan. So terrace darshan, everybody was allowed to take pictures. So I also got a better camera and I also started taking the terrace darshan pictures. And many others also were taking. And even guests and visitors who came from outside could get permission and take. So we used to be about 20 photographers there on the terrace of the dispensary. Now buildings have come up and we used to take pictures from there. That's how my photography started. And then it was a rule in those days that whatever picture you take, you make a print and offer it to the mother. So I used to give those pictures and mother used to tell me which is a nice picture and this is not right, this you should have done this way, composing. I was not a very artistic person by nature. But then when I started doing serious photography, she started encouraging me, and also she started, when I used to go for pranams, she used to, whenever she got these flowers of artistic taste, artistic sensibility, and there are many of artistic things, those she used to keep for me, to build up in me an artistic sense. So those, that way she was encouraging me. And then all photography stopped naturally when she went up. And I think I was very clever. I started asking her on my birthday. She used to remember my birthday 1 month in advance and would ask me, what do you want? And I would say, Mother, give me something that you have used. So I have a whole collection of things that Mother has given me, which she has used. And then the last years, I started asking Mother, can I take picture on my birthday? And then she could not, it was my birthday present. So she could not say no. So that's how the last few years are pictures only on my birthdays. There are no other pictures. That is it from 1969, 70, 71, 74. There are others also. It's not that there are not, but most of them are only on my birthday. We took on Mother's, on the centenary also, this 1972 Sri Aurobindo centenary, there are pictures. And Mother's 80th birthday, of course, was before that. Anyway, that is how it happened.
Saradi, after she left her body, how you prepare yourself to feel her presence and force in your work?
I told you no philosophical questions and no personal questions. No, how I feel is my business. Everybody was different.
But how one can prepare when
That you have to prepare yourself, no? That cannot be answered by me. Each one is different, each one is unique. See, she may have showered physically love on me. It doesn't mean that that love is not on everybody around here. It is there with everybody. One has to get it, one has to feel it, one has to be receptive. But maybe physically because I got, I'm lucky. But it doesn't mean that I'm any better than anybody else. Didn't make me a better person.
Didi, do you remember the...
Take the mic, please, if possible. We are recording.
Could you express your experience or feeling at the atmosphere when Sri Aurobindo passed?
Very difficult to say. These are things which are these are all things very difficult to express. Very difficult. Very difficult. Mother also stopped coming out for 12 days. And we were, as children, we were at a loss. Games, our elders told us no playing of games, no, nothing that is exciting should be done. You stay calm, stay quiet, which was very difficult. I was 14 years old then, and there were others who were much younger. And they would start playing and, no, don't play, sit down. Things like that. They created a kind of a, but that was not created by mother, it was created by our elders. But there was something very tangible in the atmosphere, that I will say.
Radhi, you have been very lucky to be in that golden era when Mother and Sri Aurobindo both were there, and a very closed community, or a rather very close-knit community, I would say.
Family.
Family, yes. And now when you see this whole journey, when we have started from there and the work is expanding in different places, different fields, and when their so-called physical presence, the material body, I would say, or whatever it is, for us it is very concrete that they are there, but still not in that same form which you all have seen. How do you see this whole journey, or what do you see the future as now?
As I told you right in the beginning, I don't have a philosophical mind. I just don't care what the journey is going to be. I just follow. Why break my mind? Now everybody asks me about the supramental. What will the supramental? How do I know? I haven't reached that stage. And there are people who give you lectures on what the supramental is going to be and how it is going to affect the whole world and all that. I don't question these things. My mind is not that kind. I just don't question. I have no other gurus. Many people have tried to take me here, they're unsuccessful. I am absolutely stuck in concrete. For me, Mother and Sri Aurobindo are everything, and whatever they will do is fine. I don't break my head over what will be. Let it be, we'll go on. We go on working, we try to improve things, but that is at a different level. At the higher level, it has to be their force, not our force. We only have to remain receptive, and we only have to be surrendered to help in their path. More than that, we can't think of what the future will be. I at least don't bother about it.
Wanted to know two moments of your life with Mother. One, did she ever scolded you? And
Scolded me?
Yeah. And let me complete the question so you can answer mine. And second, any moment which was full of delight for you, maybe whatever, I don't know. She gifted a toffee or whatever.
The delight moments I have written in the book. The scolding moments maybe I have not. I don't think we can call mothers ever scolded anybody. She used to become stern when she wanted to show that you had done something wrong. She would be stern. But I don't think she ever scolded, because scolding brings you down. It hurts you or anything. Everything that she said or did or with us children was always uplifting. Any word that she used was always uplifting. She never said, why did you do like this? You know what will happen if you do like this? Never. It was always, if you would have done it this way, you would, your consciousness would have grown. or whatever way she would tell. It was always uplifting. That was her greatness. That was the way she dealt with children. So if you want to say scolding sometimes, I mean, she would be stern. Never really scolded children. I don't think ever.
I heard you were one of the naughtiest children there, and you wanted to stop schooling at 13. And how did she accept it, and how did she help you to proceed further?
You have to remember that it was almost 70 years back. And the atmosphere, the climate, everything was different in those days. There were hundreds and thousands of Indians that didn't go to school. There were not many women, even in the outside world, who went to school. School was not an important part of life. And even when we used to go to the 6 of us together, then we were always late because mother was late coming to see us. So we were late in class back. It was during the half-an-hour recess that we used to go to her. And later it became long, then she changed the time because we were always missing classes. But one day we were all together in the playground with mother, and our teacher came and told mother, these girls are late to school every day. Late to the class every day. It was his class after recess that we used to be late in. It was a French class. And then mother looked at him. She said, is your class more important than the children coming to see me? He had no words. He kept quiet. So that is how. And another time, another teacher came and told mother, these people do so much mischief in my class. I was one of those. They don't allow the others also to study. So mother told him, I don't think your class could be very interesting. Then after that we used to see him with mother every day in the evening after distribution. She used to, sometimes people used to come and he used to go every day and talk to her. So evidently he was taking instructions on how to make his class more interesting, and it did become. After that we stopped doing mischief because his class was interesting. So mother was guiding him how to make the class more interesting.
Another part of the question?
Oh, other part of the question, why I... Yeah, as I said, you see, what actually circumstances made it so. I was only 7 years old and we were many brothers and sisters, and my father was a very, very active freedom fighter. So he was constantly in and out of jail. And my mother had to look after us, and his own brothers, my father's brothers, were all young. The second brother was 8 years younger to him, and the last brother was 15 years younger to him. So he brought them all from, which is now in Pakistan, from Wahali, a village in Jhelum district. He brought the brothers to Delhi for study. He himself studied only up to matriculate, but he was very intelligent. And that was enough for him actually. He did very well by himself. And he was in the freedom movement. And then my mother had to look after his brothers, and she had to look after us. So what my father did, he put us all in different boarding schools. And whenever he tried to find out what is good, in those days convents were supposed to be the best. So should we put the children in convents? Should I put them in these traditional Indian schools, in gurukuls? He put my elder sister in a gurukul. Then when my mother went to see her the first time, 6-year-old girl wrapped in a sari, my mother picked her up and brought her home. And then, so that way, my elder sister later was in Sir Gangaram School, a very famous communist Indian school in Lahore. And I was in Sacred Heart School in Lahore. And in Sacred Heart School in Lahore, we had all these foreign nuns to teach us. And anybody they caught speaking in Hindi would be punished immediately. At that age, I was 7 years old. I had to eat with a fork and spoon. The minute I put the fork down, it would come on with not a cane, but a ruler on the hand. They would hit so hard. It was one of the most miserable years of my life. And I was one of the youngest there. There was one girl younger to me. I was so small, left away from my mother and in a boarding school. And but I learned to speak English in that 1 year. And when I came to Pondicherry, all the other children didn't speak English, and I was speaking fluent English. So when they put me in school, in the class, they put me above my age. Okay, I could speak English, but I couldn't cope up with the other subjects, mathematics, science, whatever. I just couldn't cope up. And I had people like Manoj Das Gupta, who is now the managing trustee of the ashram. He was very, very intelligent. And he was in the same class. He's 1 year and 9 months elder to me. And because I spoke English, I was put there. So I didn't have any interest in school. So gradually it started getting, and there was no failing. You never failed. So even if I couldn't cope up, I was just promoted. So that is why I lost interest in the school, and one day I told then I was disturbing the other children. I was naughty. So I was disturbing the other children, and one day I told mother I don't want to go to school. She said, why? I said, mother, I don't like, I can't cope up with the classes and I disturb the others. So she said, what will you do? Then she made me make my whole program. I left school, but she made me make my whole program, and she saw to it that I was disciplined. What will you do? I said, I want to do sports. So she put me in the physical education department. I learned to organize. That is where I learned all the tournaments, games tournament, athletic competitions. We had big charts because mother was coming towards the end. There were 1,500 people participating in the athletic tournament. So the schedule had to be made, the groups had to be made, dates had to be fixed, timings had to be given. All this work I learned very fast. And that's how I got the organizing capacity from there. I was looking after the library. I learned to organize the library. I was interested in music, although I had no talent or gift for music. I don't have. But I was interested, so she arranged for me to learn the flute. Then she arranged for me to learn guitar, all these things. And she saw to it that I followed a very strict discipline. And I did. I followed because she used to check on me every day. One day I was not at the balcony darshan, she would ask me, why were you not there? Mother, I was sleeping. So, she had her own way, and at the age of 14 I left school. And I don't regret it at all, because when I see the others, all that they learned is useless for them.
You were leading the march past in the playground, and how was the experience in there? And did mother give any feedback, specific feedback to you?
Mother
give any feedback to you when you were leading the march past? And I have one more question about your 6 other friends. What is their experience? Do you have any contact with them? Those 6 friends in the boarding school.
The 6 friends in the they were not in the boarding school. We were just 6 friends, and 2 of them are gone. One died about 10 years back. One died very recently, 3 months back. And 4 of us are still there. We are still very good friends. We are great friends. And we meet every time I go to Pondicherry, I meet them. We're very close. But we are all now between 78, 80. I was the eldest. So. March past, I don't know, I don't remember any feedback because I was not the only one leading the march past. We had so many groups and each group had a leader. When she made the captains group, then there were fixed captains for each group. So I was one of the captains, one of the others also. I don't remember any feedback.
Could you express that about mother wearing saris?
I don't know if you will believe me when I tell you that I never noticed. Even today, I say, oh, so and so passed by here, go and look for him. What is he wearing? I never noticed people's clothes even today. And when others were not going up, I was one of the privileged ones who was still going to mother. When I would come down, my friends would ask me, what was mother wearing today? I never knew, and I know she wore beautiful clothes, and I have many of them now in my collection. And I know they were beautifully embroidered on our birthdays. Everybody used to do something for the mother as an offering on their birthdays. Some people used to make embroidered clothes, salwar kameez, saris, or whatever. It was something which everybody enjoyed doing, and mother really praised them and appreciated the work that the children did. Some used to make other things, bookmarks and whatnot. And I was one who didn't do all these things. I used to make photographs for her. So somehow I never noticed people's clothes, never. Even today I don't. And mother, I used to come down, what color was mother wearing, I don't know. I never really knew.
Tara, this is one additional thing to this. You have put up this Kali's sari. Mother Kali's sari you have...
Kali, I told you I have some in my possession, some of those things. Mother wore that on Kali Puja day, and then later she gave it to me.
It's a very beautiful sari, that sari with embroidery.
It is not with embroidery.
Not embroidery, with the...
There are two colors, white and red. On Kali Puja day, she used to wear red.
Red. And it is in your collection in Smriti there.
One. There were so many saris she has.
And when you make a photo, you are working with chemical process too?
Pardon?
Were you developing the pictures?
Everything. I learnt everything. Absolutely. I could develop pictures that big. Today it is no problem. You just click, and if you take 100 pictures, you find one good one, and you can. But at that time we had to calculate because it cost money, and we had no money.
And chemical.
And all the chemicals, yes, developing the film, printing, everything I did myself. And so that was an offering to the mother whenever. And mother used to feel so happy because there were not other people who could do that. And those who could were not doing it. And I was always offering her pictures. Whenever we took pictures, she used to mark, I want this picture, I want this picture, this picture. So we used to make it in different sizes and give her. She loved giving her pictures to people. So when she could give freely, it made her happy.
Since you were in the boarding and staying away from parents, and many other kids would also be there, and since she is the mother, did any of the children ever make a very exceptional request like, can I sleep with you tonight, mother? Or can I sit on your lap and you feed me? No one?
No, no, no. She was on a throne.
Yeah.
So we were in awe of her.
Yeah. Okay. I wonder what she would have done then.
Taravi, you spoke of the mother becoming stern sometimes. So what kind of behavior or attitude made her become like that and disapprove? And what, on the other hand, did she particularly, and what kind of behavior or attitude was she really glad about and appreciative about?
It's difficult to say. It is difficult to say. It was all, for each thing it was different. And I don't know what she was telling to other people, other children. So she did become stern with other children. Vaguely I remember there was one boy who used to do paintings. And he made a painting which she did not like. And she became very stern and he came down almost in tears. Because she said, what have you done? She must have painted something which was lowering of the consciousness or whatever it may have been, I don't know. She became stern with me when I asked her to start the classes again. She became very stern. So each thing is different. It's very difficult to say for what. But appreciation, love, she showed all the time to everybody, for every little thing. This stern behavior was very rare.
Taravi, just to add to Gopal's question, what kind of attitude she encouraged in the people around, including you?
What kind of attitude she encouraged? Attitude, I suppose she encouraged everything that was good or progressive. As I wrote in my book, that was one word which was always there. Have you progressed with what you are doing? How much have you progressed? Where do you feel that you have progressed? Progress on every level of the consciousness. That was a big stress in our days. Whether I ran my 100 meters, I progressed or not, I made it worse or not, that also. It was not only in the consciousness, but even at the physical level.
Taravi, mother have given someone tight slap?
Yes. One day I was there, I was not near the mother, but I was a little away, and she was talking to Amritada, Nalinida, Pavitrada and Ravindraji. 4 of them were there, all big ashram special people, and they were discussing something very special, very concentratedly with mother. And then Amritada had the habit of cutting jokes all the time. And he cut a joke and she gave him a slap. And he said, thank you, mother. And it was not just like that slap. She gave him a hard one.
You tell that, no? What you're saying. And to add to that, I think Amritada told mother, I didn't shave today, so I think your hand would have hurt because of that.
Oh, Amritada was really, he had such a sense of humor. Very, very beautiful sense of humor. Never bringing you down. It was always uplifting sense of humor. He used to joke and we used to go and talk to him just to laugh a little bit. Got the voice of a mouse. ये वाली लड़की. अच्छा, okay. Go on.
I had a question. Did the mother ever teach you anything about art? Or do you remember anything specifically that she taught you or that was memorable for you in terms of art? Because I knew she was very artistic, like in painting and everything.
But photography is an art, she taught me. whether she taught art or not, to some people she did, not to me. I was most unartistic, most unartistic. But she taught me photography, and she did so many times she guided me on the pictures that I was taking. So that is also art. But if you ask me painting, I no patience to sit and paint. She saw that I was no good at it. She didn't try.
Shall we now give it to Faith?
हाँ, उसको दो जिसका ले लिया था.
As we have seen in the film, and also we know that Sri Aurobindo was a great revolutionary and political leader. Did Mother tell you anything about that things? How he was used to be?
I don't think I need to say anything about what Mother said about Sri Aurobindo. She has spoken so much, and it is all over printed and everywhere it is there. There is nothing new I can tell you, nothing new.
You were with Mother since very small age, as a child, and you had a lot of good moment as a child also. But my question is, when did or at what age you realized, that she is the Mother, the divine sort of?
Consciously or unconsciously, right from the beginning. Our teachers, our wardens, everybody made us feel that she is the divine, she is the divine. When you hear that all the time, whether you consciously do it or unconsciously, it was always, we were in awe of her.
Was there any specific experience when you found within?
There were experiences and experiences. Naturally, when you live 30 years with a soul of that level, there have to be experiences. You both have Arun ji photos.
Can you share with us a little bit how was her sense of humor?
Mother's. Well, she did laugh. Very often when we made comments or we told her something which was not this thing. In that, I don't know, have they seen the film A New Birth? Have you seen?
We are seeing it in Madhuban.
Huh?
We are seeing it in Madhuban.
They are seeing it in Madhuban. Okay. The mother laughs at my father in that film. So she used to laugh. Sense of humor, and she did have, of course. Isn't it tea time now?
Arun, just last
Taraji, tell us something about this place, Vande Bhas.
Yeah.
Its history and how it has come and all that.
The Britishers moved their summer government always onto the hill stations, and Nainital was one of them. And they had the Indians as slaves, so they used to, these were hills, and they completely leveled them with labor to build beautiful houses. There are several of them. They are like palaces. They were built like palaces, huge buildings, and they always have a tennis court. The playground there, down, I think you people have been there and seen, there is a playground down. That was the tennis court, and it had, when my father took over, it still had the net. And during the British time, they used to come up on horses. They all had horses and everything. Those two buildings were outhouses. We've demolished them and made into Fakir Kutir and this, but there the servants lived, and there they had the horse stables and everything. Even Jim Corbett has lived on, has bought this place for a while and then sold it. It is in the records. We have seen Jim Corbett's name also. Later, it was owned by the Maharaja of Nepal. Not Maharaja, Ranas of Nepal. That is the royal family. And this Rana of Nepal was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. My father liked this place and he came here and he wanted to buy it. So he contacted, and there was an agreement, and as an advance 5,000 rupees were, today 5,000 is a lot of money, but it was given to the Rana for making the deal. And while the paperwork was still not done, my father talked to the Rana, because the Rana gave this Ulsur Palace in Bangalore. He donated it to Sri Aurobindo Society. So my father told him, if you have donated that, why don't you donate this also? So he agreed. He agreed and he said, okay, I will give it, I will not take the rest of the money. But in the meantime, he died before the paperwork could be completed. And then my father was afraid that somebody will come, and it was in a dilapidated condition. There were these tiger heads and these deer heads and all that all over the place, and antique furniture you can still see on the first floor. We put them all in that. And everything got stolen while the transaction was being done. Lot of things got stolen. And the whole thing was in very bad shape. So as soon as the Maharaja died, my father came up and started staying here more than in Delhi, because he thought that if he spends a lot of money and builds up the ashram, they will not be able to take it back. And that is what happened. So he built all these extra rooms. The front was all wooden, which was finishing. Then this front became cement. Behind also, there was a wooden part that also is gone. One part had totally crumbled down. That has been rebuilt. So it is a mixture of old and new. But these halls where we are sitting in the front, they are all new. They are all old, more than 100 years old. And the relics hall was their church. They had, whoever the British people, they used to make the little alcoves or whatever you call them. And that was the church. So that we didn't change, we just made it into the relics hall. And then many years later, there were 18 years that we found out. So we were sure that they will never manage to get together. But 1 year came and he demanded that this is my property and I want it back. So we gave a legal answer, and he realized that he can't get it back because we were already been here for 20 years and nobody had ever questioned. So this became, my father also changed the name. It was called Ben Nevis. This hill is called Ben Nevis. Ben Nevis is the highest peak in Scotland. And he changed its name to Ban Nivas, means forest house. And sounds the same. So then once he cleaned up a little bit, there was not a single toilet, because in those days there were no toilets. They had only commodes which the sweepers used to come and pick up. And my father built a few toilets here, but after his passing away, we built all the toilets because more people started coming here. And before, only the school, Mothers International School children used to come. Then we started actually in 1977 when I came to Delhi in 1976, 3 years after Mother had passed away. And for Mother's centenary year, I started the first camp here. And from that time it has been one camp, then 2 camps, then 3 camps. Today I don't know how many camps we have here through the year. So this is kind of Delhi Ashram's campsite. There is Brookhill Estate down, which about now the last 10 years, it has been given to the High Court, and the Chief Justice of the High Court was living at Brookhill Estate. I came in 1971 to Delhi just for an outing, and my father brought me here to show me the Himalayas, and by car I went to Ranikhet, Almora, everywhere, traveled a lot. And that time he took me also to Brookhill Estate, where Sri Aurobindo lived in 1901 with his wife. Soon after his wedding, he came with the Gaikwad of Baroda. The Gaikwad of Baroda came for a month, and in his retinue, Sri Aurobindo was also there. Nobody knew anything about where Sri Aurobindo has lived in all these years. Nobody knew. So only this much was known, that the Gaikwad lived there, so Sri Aurobindo also has lived there. There were 2 houses in Brookhill Estate, the upper bungalow and the lower bungalow. The upper bungalow was a beautiful one, and the lower bungalow was probably for the staff of the Gaikwad and all that. So I took pictures of both, and I made an album of it, and I took it to the mother in 1971. And she saw the whole thing with a lot of interest, and asked me many questions about how far it was. And the entire view of the lake you can have from that place. So since the British left, that became a government guest house. It was with the government throughout, and the Gaikwad came as a guest of the government. So they lived there. So I told mother, nobody knows where Sri Aurobindo lived. So mother pointed out the upper bungalow. So that we accept as surely he lived in the upper bungalow. Now, in 1972, 1 year after mother pointed out, the local people celebrated Sri Aurobindo's 100th anniversary there, because Sri Aurobindo had been there, it was his centenary. So they made a program in that building. They got government's permission, and my father got 2 big photographs of mother and Sri Aurobindo put there. This was in 1972, already quite a few years back, and they were having a program there, and they had invited a devotee, sitarist from Almora. He used to play the sitar, and he was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. So he came and he was playing the sitar, and while he was in the middle of it, he suddenly threw his sitar. Sri Aurobindo lived in room number 3 and ran upstairs, and everybody ran after him. And so it got established that Sri Aurobindo lived in room number 3, nobody really knows. Then, when I joined the Delhi Ashram in 1978 or something, I had come here for a camp with Chote Narayanji. And Chote Narayanji, after the camp was over, my father called us both and said, take the car and go to Lucknow and talk to C.P.N. Singh. C.P.N. Singh was close to Kirit Joshi and was doing a lot of things for the mother, but later it became another story. But anyhow, C.P.N. Singh was the governor at that time of UP. This was under UP. So we went there and we told him that this place should be handed over as a center for Sri Aurobindo. And he agreed. And he handed over 1 room, room number 3, to us. And we put the photographs there, we put the complete library of Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's works in room number 3. And then every Sunday they were having satsang there. The local devotees, slowly, as it happens everywhere, it fizzled out. Then first there were 20 people, then there were 15, then there were 10, then there were 5, then there was nobody. And the room remained locked and no one used to go there. And we tried to revive it many times. It revived for a little while and then again it went back. And then for a long time it remained without anybody going there. And we were not, here we used to come only for 15, 20 days or a month in summer. Nobody was living here in those days. And one fine day we heard that they have broken the lock and made another guest room there. And Sri Aurobindo's things have been removed. But they didn't throw away the pictures. They brought them down to the lobby and they put Mother's and Sri Aurobindo's pictures in the lobby where they remained until now. When the new High Court judge, the Chief Justice of the High Court, stayed there, he said these photographs are not to be removed. And they remained there throughout. Recently, about 6 months back, we heard that they are going to demolish that building. So we tried very hard. Many people here got together, and I was not here, but they went to court, they did everything. But the question was always, where is the proof that Sri Aurobindo lived there? There was no proof. We have no proof. Even in the guest records we could not find. Of 1901 it must be impossible also. So we never got to know, and only last week they were afraid that these devotees will start making more noise. Before anybody can say anything, they have broken the building. The building is gone, and all the furniture, everything they put up for sale and everything. The Chief Justice came down and he saw those photographs. He said, these are not to be given away. I will take them to my house. So wherever his house is, he has taken away those photos. So that is the situation. We have not followed up after that. But there is a belief, we have a belief that whenever there are two dignitaries or two royalties in one place, they always visit each other. And at one time you could see the Brook Hill estate from here. Today you can't because of the houses and the trees and everything. So we believe that the Rana was living here, and in summer the Rana used to come, and the Gaikwad was living in Brook Hill estate. They must have paid a visit to each other, and the Maharaja of Gaikwad must have come to this place, and with him Sri Aurobindo was his private secretary, so Sri Aurobindo also must have come to this place, and he must have put his feet here. So we believe in that, and we want to believe it. Yes, she did. Nothing in writing, but my father used to always give, every day he used to send a letter to Mother. Unfortunately, in Pondicherry can't trace those letters anymore. But Mother knew about this purchase, she knew about it, everything she knew, because this was, I don't remember exactly, I think in 1968 my father bought it.
Radhini, I think press conference is being prolonged. But last question, you traveled Europe very alone so much. Could you please tell about your traveling alone to entire Europe?
It is not interesting. I have traveled so much, then I'll go on telling stories about those travels.
Then you were not interesting. Interesting.
Most interesting.
Yes, I've seen Mother's house in Paris. It is occupied by somebody who says, I don't know why people come and stare at my house. And Kantilal Dalal is no more. He was collecting money to buy that house. Somebody has to be passionate about it and go and buy it. But Mother herself never gave importance to these things.
What about her son and his students?
He is not there anymore. Andreda, he was a different kind of a yogi. I don't think he would try to do all these things. Mother's one granddaughter is still there, one is gone. The elder granddaughter is now in Pondicherry. She's, I don't know, 90 something. And then there is the great grandson and great granddaughter too are there.
They are in Pondicherry too?
Yes, the great grandson is in Pondicherry.
Okay.
And she comes and goes. The great granddaughter.
Didi, about Madhuban, could you tell a little bit?
Madhuban will talk in Madhuban. What's the time? I think it's time, no? Yeah, all the programs will get delayed.
No, we have asked for tea at 11.
Yeah, we have.
We'll not get this chance maybe. So it's
Yeah. Saradi, you're not afraid of going alone anywhere?
He has a question.
I'm not afraid. Somewhere I was not. Even in sports, when the diving board was made, the first 5-meter diving board, everybody was being afraid of jumping. And I was the first one to jump. And I always had a great ambition to jump from the aeroplane with a parachute. I wanted as a child, I really wanted, but I had bad eyes. I have bad eyes from childhood. Now they're very bad. But and in those days it was not allowed. If you have bad eyes, you can't go. So when I came first time to Delhi, I told my brother, please find out, I want to do parachute jump. They said, nothing doing, no way. But on my 77th birthday, I did paragliding for the first time.
He has a question.
Taradi, I wanted to ask about how the ashram was organized into departments and how did mother do that and what kind of attributes she looked in people who were leading these departments and so on.
I don't think anything was really organized. It was very, very spontaneous. And that is why we are spread over all the town in Pondicherry. There is no... when I went first time in 1958, I told mother I want to go to the Himalayas. So she encouraged me. She said, oh, I love the Himalayas. I have been in my astral body. I have seen so much. You must go. So me and my sisters, we went to the Himalayas, and my father and my elder brother, they took us around a lot of places. And I came back with an album for mother to see. And that time she told me, she said, I would have made if I had my choice, I would have made the ashram in the Himalayas. But when I told Sri Aurobindo, he said, now I am here and I don't move. So he was sitting in the main building. At one time, even mother wanted to shift the ashram to the lake, near the lake, because there was so much place there. Here it went on, one house here, one house there, one house there, you all know it. So when she talked about that also, Sri Aurobindo said, I am not moving from here. So everything grew spontaneously. I don't think there was any, from an ordinary mental point of view, I don't think there was any organizational planning. Somebody came and told her mother, I want to start making tiles. So she told Udar, find a place. So they found that place near the sports ground, and there they started making these tiles. And person whoever took interest, then somebody said we were getting perfumes from, mother was fond of perfumes and all. There were many things that used to come from France. And when there was the merger with India, there was no free, duty-free things available anymore. So Udar told mother, why don't we start our own perfume department? And she encouraged him. And then today you see, we have such a big perfume department. So and she told some of the young girls to learn. Among them, one of them remained, she is now, how old? She is now almost 90. And she's still sitting there at the counter, making bills and whatnot and controlling everything. So that is how it is. It just, I think, blossomed. It just blossomed. The right person has to come along.
Never ending today.
No, she's saying till 11, so.
The mother was very much fond of very much fond of flowers, and she had given unique names to different flowers. I have heard that you had helped in the publishing of that book, Significance of Flowers.
I have done the entire work of the book of flowers with mother. The entire original manuscript is with me only, in mother's handwriting. Anyway, coming to mother, always encouraged children to love flowers. And in our school also, we were taught the significance of flowers and we were taught to collect. And then when we used to go to mother, it was very significant. What flower did she give you today? What was the significance of that? We had to know. So to some people she used to give one flower, to some she used to give 5, 6 flowers, and we used to come back and find out the significance, and our teachers, our wardens, everybody used to encourage us in that because mother wanted it that way. And on birthdays she used to give a bouquet. Now I didn't make any note of it, but I know people who every year wrote what flowers mother gave in the bouquet. And in their diaries, probably they must be in the archives. So she encouraged. When we were very small in the boarding, one day she said, you will all get a plant from Parichanda's garden, and all of you will look after a plant. So we all went there and we picked up whatever we wanted. And I picked up a plant which is called Divine's Presence. I don't know if you know the significance of it, if you can recognize the plant, but here it doesn't grow. It is a desert plant. And she developed in us that love for plants and flowers and all that. And we picked up and we were supposed to water our plants every day. There was Urmila in the boarding, and she was so good with plants, and her flowers bloomed so well. She had a hibiscus, and that was supramental consciousness. And she would, every time she got a flower, she would pluck it and take it to mother, and it was very special. Others also did that. Mine was this small flower, Divine's Presence. I used to take it. One by one, everybody's plants died, and Urmila's didn't die. She took so much care, and there was one more girl whose plant did not die, and mine did not die. And I never took care of it. And I never watered it. I always forgot, but mine did not die. Years later, when I came to Delhi and I started doing gardening, now I do a lot of gardening, and after mother made me do the book of flowers and everything, I found out that it is a desert plant and it doesn't need watering. It was just my luck.
One quick follow-up. Flower tree, if you could take us around this area, flowers, different flowers.
Everybody has already seen.
Yeah, we have seen.
But we do not know the significance or the importance.
You bring the flowers, I'll tell you. Or you take me and tell me.
Nalinji will not allow his flowers being
Nalinji won't allow, he's standing there. He won't allow you to pluck.
You have a question?
Khatam.
If you were in the physical education department, did you ever get to see mother like play tennis? Or
Yes.
Did you
I
get to
played
play
with
with
her
her?
also.
Yeah.
I played with her. On our birthdays, we were always, that was the privilege we got, to play tennis with mother.
Did you defeat her?
I don't remember whether I defeated her or not, but we were not supposed to play making her run. We were supposed to only pass the ball to her hand. But I was not very good at tennis. So I don't know if I managed to give her every time back to her hand or not also. It used to go here and there. But there were many people who played well with her. My elder brother was a tennis player, and he used to go, every time he came to Pondicherry, mother used to invite him to play. And she enjoyed playing with him because he was able to return the balls to her, and they had long volleys.
I heard I think it was the early years of the ashram, that mother was very flexible. So she would give a structure or an order to do something for maybe 2 weeks, and then she would change everything. But I'm not more clearer about it. Maybe you could share something?
We all people who live in the ashram and who have lived with her, most of us have the habit of saying, mother said this and mother said that and mother did this and mother did that. But she was so wide, she never attached any importance to any fixed thing. And in my notebook also she wrote, don't make dogmas of what I say, because each thing is true in its own place and time. And I think even if she did change that, I'm not surprised, but I don't know if this happened or not. It's not something that... There is a story of this kind in my father's book. My father has a book, very hilarious, My Mother. He had a tremendous sense of humor, my father. And he has written his anecdotes with the mother. It's called My Mother. And in that he has written that when he came to Pondicherry, my mother had the last baby, and she insisted on coming, and mother didn't give permission. She said, no, for the child, it's not good to come to Pondicherry. But she insisted so much that he brought her to Chennai, Madras at that time, and left her in Madras and went alone to Pondicherry. And when he went, mother asked, where is your wife? She said, I left her in Madras. Why did you leave her in Madras? You see, so she herself told not to come, and then she said, why, go back and bring her. So there are many such instances. Khatam karo na.
Saradi, were you present on that beautiful Wednesday afternoon when the supramental descent took place in 1956? Were you part of the meditation group on the playground that day?
I was sitting right next to mother. I was sitting right next to mother on her left side, and I'm sorry, I don't know what happened.
We want to sit right next to you.
I know you won't answer any philosophical questions, but lot of the questions and answers in the collected works are from you. That means questions have been asked by you. And she has given all the answers, and even today's philosophers also enjoy and they enlighten. But you say that you don't know about philosophy.
They have written everything, you read them. Now, she started the Wednesday classes when I was 15 years old. Soon after I left school, she started with the prayers and meditations with us, and we were the red group people. There was one, my younger sister from green group, and one Manoj Das Gupta, who was from C group, and he was in our class. Otherwise, we were all from the B group or the red group class. She started these classes, and we were supposed to read the prayer in advance and come and ask her questions. So for a while it went okay, people were asking, and the crowd started growing. Mother, can I join the class? Can I? And when it was non-B group, she would say, yes, you can join, but you sit at the back. Slowly the whole playground was full, people were allowed, it became free. Anybody can come and sit at the back. But the class was only the B group class. And we were supposed to ask questions. And because when it became so big, the other girls and boys, they became, mostly it was girls, and they became very timid and afraid of asking in front of so many people, shy or whatever you may say. And no questions were coming. So a few times mother started telling herself something. Then she said, why don't you, when we used to go up to her all six together, she used to literally say, why don't you ask questions? You have no curiosity, you don't want to know anything, you don't ask any questions and all. You just ask anything. It is French, it is all in French. If there is one word you don't understand, ask me that. From there, I will make my own half an hour or 1 hour talk. So, for some time it went on. Then again it became nobody's asking questions. Then she started, you have a question, you have a question, you have a question, you have a question. No, she put the book down and she went away. She went away to her room. Next day when we went up to her, she said, what is this? Why do you people not ask any questions? I keep telling you, if you don't ask questions, I will stop the classes. And she said all these things a lot looking at me. So then I became very serious about the classes and I started writing several questions. I used to read and take out anything, just anything, sometimes very stupid questions. But I used to make questions, and whenever mother nobody else asked a question, I was always asking. Because the main thing is that I was less afraid than the others. It is true. It is true that others, no, Baba, I won't ask, that kind of thing. All my friends were like that. And I was bold. So I used to ask the questions, and that is why 80% of the book, these questions and answers, they are questions which I have asked, and sometimes so stupid questions. Now when I look at them, I say, how I was 17 years old and how could I ask this? I was 18 years old and how could I ask? They are very, sometimes very stupid questions, but at least I was asking and others were not. That is why when the classes stopped in 1958, I used to go on telling mother so many times, Mother, even if you do the classes, we'll come up to your room. Let us have the classes, let us have the classes. And every time she would just smile and say, not yet, and it never happened. Until that, when she became very stern and almost scolding me, she said, I don't want to do the classes, nobody has any curiosity, nobody asks any questions. And I started crying. Then she embraced me and she said, no, you were asking. So you can write and send your book and I will answer. So that is how the growing up with the mother, that is the book that came after that.
Even locals are allowed to come into the playground.
Who?
Locals.
No, they had to take a pass. In those days, local people were not interested. It is only after the Jipmer came, that hospital. After that hospital came that some doctors and all started coming and the local people got educated. They didn't even speak English, no. Of course, they were local, mother spoke in French, that I forgot. Mother used to speak in French.
And Tara Didi, what did Chachaji think about your asking too many questions?
What did my father think about asking so many questions? He said, he used to sit at the back also whenever he was there, and he said, what is this? Everybody understands everything, you are the only one who doesn't understand.
The class continues.
Pardon? Always. Mother's homeworks always. School, no. School I never did. I was always a problem for the teachers. As long as I went to school. Most of us were very serious about mother's classes. They were timid, but they were serious. It's not that they didn't take interest or they didn't. They were frightened of the crowds that were there.
Last question.
Last question, okay.
As I know, every moment you spend with mother is very special. Any moment still with you, you never forget that moment. It's very, very special till now.
I've written so many special in my book.
I know if you say that, more interesting it will be, more touch.
I told you no personal. These things, they're not. For me, it is not easy to talk. These things. Chalo, last question finished.
We end with Om?
Yeah, come.
Just say Om, Sita.